Hello, welcome to the Seeker's Reset. My name is Robert. I am your host, and this is the first time that I am recording in my car, which I think from all the videos I've watched on YouTube, at some point when you're getting started on YouTube, either you're starting in your car or you're having an episode somewhere along the line in your car. And so here I am doing just that. Because very often in the house that I'm living in, my parents' house, the house that I grew up in, I can't get a good signal in the rooms where I have privacy, which on some metaphorical level makes a lot of sense. Like when I was young, when I couldn't find the spaces that I needed in my home to express myself, to feel what I needed to feel, to heal, to grow. Well, let's focus on the first of those, or all of them, but the first couple of those for the purposes of this video, because the topic for this video is language as an obstacle to growth. So, why is language an obstacle to growth? Because language usually comes second to the experience and the realities of growth. And therefore, when we get caught up in trying to understand or express things linguistically, we actually postpone, interrupt, and or negate the real growth which happens in the heart and the soul and even the mind, um, but does not require language. So why do we want language? I know I want language. I've focused much of my life on language. I became determined at a young age, probably around the age of, I don't know, 12 or 13. It started for me, where I started to recognize that language had power in our society, that people with access to a greater vocabulary or who could make arguments linguistically, like lawyers, who could tell stories, who could impress people with jokes. Language seemed to be at the core or central to all forms of influence, almost all forms of influence, at least those things those forms of influence that interested me. And as I got older, I got really good with language. I got really good at speaking. I was a public speaker. Speaking was the tool that I used to find success in this world. It was the main tool. And speaking is a matter of presence and also language, charisma, presence, and language. So for me, language became, and I was also always very talented learning other languages like Italian and German. I've always had a knack for learning languages, although very few of them stick with me. Interesting. So I have wanted most of my life to work things out through the use of language. And what that became also over time was a need to convince people, a need to persuade people, a desire to convince and persuade that actually was deep down and still is an addiction, codependent addiction to needing people's approval and support. And language facilitated that for me. And one of the only reasons that we need language is to rationalize something, is to convince either ourselves or another person. So a lot of times we want language to describe what we're going through, language to describe our goals, language to describe why it's important that we are on the path that we're on, maybe even why other people should do it or consider it. And we often strive for that ahead of actually just doing things and going through the process. Moreover, when we use language, we concretize things. we create expectations, and we imagine specific ways in which things will play out or should play out. Now, we don't do this exclusively with language, we do it with imagery as well, but language is pretty important to that process for many of us. And so language is an obstacle to the actual experience of growth. And I am learning more and more as I go through this process that I have to let go of being able to describe things. And I use this space to do some of that processing and to share some of the things that I think am learning or know. But in my life, I focus more and more from the influence of divine truth. And not just that, there are other good sources that are non-divine truth in nature. And I've referenced the mindful gardener as just one of them. That is a very, very good resource for going through the process of feeling, sensation, pain, emotion, etc. Divine truth really opened me to this, and it wasn't the first time. Like, I was aware of somatic experiencing and releasing emotions, and trauma release exercises of varying kinds, and catharsis of different kinds. But I didn't really appreciate any of that until divine truth. I didn't really grasp its value and how central it was until I found divine truth. Excuse me, and I found the mindful gardener after that, just recently, just in the last couple of months, and it's been extremely helpful. Letting go of the need to put things into language and to feel and sense. This is a massive step in the reset, in the seeker's reset, as I'm describing it. It's a massive step. And it is partly, as I will talk about in an episode soon, which is regarding the subject of becoming like children, which is famously something that Jesus was written to have said in the Bible in the first century, that we must become like children. And Jesus of divine truth refers to this often. But the question is how, and one of the ways, though, one of the central ways is to feel, to go back to feeling and sensing, and not just thinking and analyzing and cognizing and putting things into words. Because children don't have access to language very easily, right? It takes them time to develop that. And before they develop it, they have emotion. They feel, they emote, they express themselves through their emotion. We all did that, almost all of us. Some of us were suppressed even before that. But we all did that when we were young. And in the reset, the seeker's reset, we have to return to that as a primary way of experiencing the world through feeling and sensing, and allowing language to come after that. Okay. Which also means following what you could call instincts or intuition more, rather than trying to calculate everything in advance. We cannot grow without letting go of that control. Language is inherently a form of control. It is a way of encapsulating experience. It's a way of encapsulating feeling. It's a way of encapsulating thought. It's a way of encapsulating sensory information and attempting to deliver it verbally. And almost always, because we're trained this way, in a narrative form that favors our egoic selves, our facades. So when we let go of language as a primary consideration, we open ourselves more to the full experience of the senses and the emotions, and we can literally and figuratively step into new realities through that. We can begin to take the pressure off having to describe and justify our experiences, which is what we've been asked to do most of our lives. One way or another, we are often implicitly and explicitly taught and required to favor description over experience and over senses. So we need to let go of that so that we can begin to develop ourselves on a more heart, soul, sensory level. Because that's part of the reset, is getting back in touch with those, allowing new faculties to guide our lives, and not just our minds and our egos and our facades. They may play some role at times, but they come second to the experience, to the senses that we have, to the emotions that we feel. This is central and crucial to the seeker's reset. It's a total shift. Now, it's a shift backward to what we would have had if we had been raised with respect for these aspects of ourselves. But we're raised in a culture that's dominated by the mind, dominated by language, dominated by symbol, dominated by everything other than our full sensory apparatus and our emotions, our hearts, and our souls. And so we have to return to that. And as we do that, we're going to want to justify ourselves to ourselves and to everybody around us. And that's where the obstacle will really come up, because we won't be able to do it. We won't have the language. Believe me, I have tried. And I'm not saying don't try, and I'm not saying there will be no language. I'm saying don't let it be primary. Let it be secondary. Let it be secondary. And let that be a way of freeing yourself from the tyranny of justifying who you are, what you're experiencing, and why. Because that is a huge part of why we remain stuck. Is because we're praying that we can justify ourselves to others before we take action or go further down the path of being reset. And it won't work. And language is even art, actually. Art, language, anything material or structured is the tool that we would use to justify. And when you start to understand language this way, it'll change your relationship with what you say, how you say it, what you expect from people when you tell them things, when you explain things to them. Tonight, I just spent, I don't know, 45 minutes talking to my parents, and I probably shouldn't have. I was talking to them about some of the things that are coming up in my experience right now, which are very, very hard. They have to do with some health issues and the emotions related to those health issues. Um, and I wanted something from them. And that's why I spent all that time talking to them. And I pretty much never got it. And honestly, in the end, I couldn't even figure out what exactly I wanted from them. I wanted permission. I wanted support. I don't know. I wanted something from them in terms of making me feel better, making me feel more confident in my chosen course of action. And because I'm scared of what I'm experiencing. So I often reach for language to try to convince others of my position, to try to get them to support me so that I can reduce my fear. And sometimes that is a useful thing to do, just as a way of getting some support. But most of the time it's not. Especially if the people around you don't really know what you're doing or what you're going through. then it's going to take a lot of effort to get the support you're looking for. And you might as well have just saved that energy and tried to feel your way through it yourself. And I think I should have done that tonight myself. And so I'm intent on talking about this language issue because it really does obstruct us. We are so inclined to language or other forms of expression as ways of justifying and describing and explaining ourselves, defending ourselves, promoting ourselves. And we have to let go of that a lot on the path of resetting because it's not essential. Children can grow and heal without language. Eventually, language comes in, but when the language comes from the heart and soul place as a starting point, it's very different. It's very different. And frankly, I am attempting to experiment with that even in these lives, insofar as I very often am really speaking about these things for the first time and wondering what will come forth, like what will really come forth from me. What will I learn as I speak? What will I feel as I speak? Language is and will change. A new language will emerge as we go through these processes. I don't know if it will actually be different from the English language or from whatever is your primary language that you speak. I don't know if it will actually be a new language that is discernibly its own thing, or if it will simply impact the way current languages are spoken, understood, and felt. I know it will be that. I know it will, at a minimum, affect the languages that we're used to and how they are felt, how they are experienced, how they are spoken. It may even result in a brand new language. That's how amazing this kind of reset can be and will be as we go through it. So don't get hung up on language. Feel, sense. Make sounds, make noises, scream, grunt, moan, sigh. Ah! I make a lot of those kinds of sounds throughout the day, many days. So make sounds, write, use language, but don't get hung up on it as something that needs to be as a way of keeping yourself in the prison of the mind and of everything other than the senses and the emotions and your heart and your soul. Interesting that this particular episode I feel less polished in my language. And I could talk so much more about this because, like, I have not even begun to express how fascinating I find language, how we program ourselves. People from esoteric traditions talk about spelling, right? We spell words, as in we cast spells. We program ourselves through language. We narrow our understanding and our ability to sense the world through language. Language is an incredible tool, but it affects us so much more than we know. So as often as possible, put it second, put it third. Feel, sense. When you write, when you speak, stop editing yourself. Stop polishing it. Stop seeking some perfect word. I'm really saying this to myself right now, just so you know. Feel, sense, make sounds, move, Don't let language be an obstacle to growth. I could say much more on this subject than I will, but not right now. Thanks for watching me in my first episode from my car. There may be more. My name is Robert. This is the Seeker's Reset, and take care for now.